You're listening to Chameleon Church. Biblical Antidotes for the Modern Man. With your host, Allan Aguirre.
So it looks like Seattle's Summer of Love is over. Something about murder just takes all the love out of it. That mayor, how embarrassing to be that mayor, to lose total control of your city, to give your city away, or to imagine if he had voted for that mayor. Just as bad. What else? White House. They're trying to make a black house autonomous zone outside the White House. Let me tell you something. I don't feel sorry for you if you're charging or rushing a riot squad, a police riot squad with a black umbrella, and you get hurt. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen in front of the White House? I just can't anymore. It's let's ask the Rabbinator. Rabbinator, what are your thoughts?
I'm just on the Happy Chameleon show. That's all that I know.
You're just happy to be here.
I'm just happy to be here.
You're just happy to be here. Oh,
yeah,
man.
see, the happy. Chameleon.
Look at that! You're got the Happy Chameleon.
That's right. With my chameleon mug.
Oh my gosh, you got the whole chameleon thing going on.
I don't even have a t-shirt. I got more swag than you do, and it's your show.
Yeah. I have no problem talking about, black people attacking white people in the streets or in supermarket parking lots or whatever, taking advantage of the situation. But you know what I think is worse? It's like you're mentioning, there's people being found lynched in parks. That's absolutely worse. Did you hear about this NASCAR driver guy in a secure area? They found a noose hanging in his car garage in the NASCAR complex. He's like the only, I guess, black NASCAR driver. Somebody put a noose in his garage, dude. That is unacceptable. That is like that's like putting a swastika on your house. That's like, you know what I'm saying? There's levels you just don't ever get to. It's not okay. It's just not okay. I think that's worse than the other form of violence. You just can't do that, man. How are they gonna? I talked to my daughter a few weeks ago about this stuff, about color and being a person of color and white privilege, all that crap. So my biological father, is Irish Mexican. So he's a little fairer skinned than most Mexicans because he's half Irish, redheaded guy. I don't know this guy. He died when I was 12. I never knew him. My mom and him divorced when I was 2. This is my bio dad. His mom was pretty indigenous, so she's going to be doing the whole, really dark skin thing going on. I got the Aztec profile. It's obvious, you own it. You go with it. My mother's white Colombian, so they're third generation from the Basque region of Spain. So they're like, they're just white. Blonde haired, white, blue eyes, green eyes, stuff like that. But they're from, they're Colombian. They're from Spain. So I've got that. So I'm like 75% Hispanic. So I've got that going on, right? I wasn't raised in a Spanish house, in a Spanish culture. I mean, and even the only Latin culture I remember was just going to some Colombian parties with the awesome, cumbia music and the aguardiente, which is like, what's that? Kuzo? That the Greeks have it. It's all
Uzo.
Yeah, right? Everybody has the same drink. It's clear. It looks like water, but it tastes like licorice, right? Everybody has that. That's the only thing I wasn't even raised. My mom spoke Spanish, but I wasn't raised speaking Spanish, and I was raised by a Lithuanian stepdad. So there's no like, if you turn me over, there's no stamp that says "Made in Mexico" type of thing, right? So I wasn't raised like that, and I didn't live that life. I remember being like in 7th grade and digging this lowrider girl. I don't know if you guys know what a lowrider is, but a Chicana, a lowrider girl. Lowriders, lowrider cars, bandanas, hey, SA, watch Training Day, the movie Training Day. Those are lowriders, okay? So there was we had a group of them in our junior high, and I dug this little lowrider girl, and so my whole 7th grade was spent jumping from different clique to different clique to different clique to see where I belong. I didn't even fit in with the musicians, and I didn't fit in with I didn't fit in with anybody. But anyway, so as I'm hanging out with these lowriders for a couple months, because I dug this little lowrider girl. I remember going to her house or walking her home from school one day, and her yard, dead grass, broken down lowriders on blocks in the driveway, full on veterans, her brothers and her uncles, and they're all full on veterans, And I'm thinking, I can't bring this girl to my house because my yard isn't dead. I don't have broken down lowriders on blocks in the driveway. My dad's not an ex-vato. I have no carnales, no ex-vatos in my family. I obviously don't belong. I'm not one of them. And I'm not, and I wasn't. So I didn't even. So anyway, all that to say, I was talking to my daughter a couple 2 or 3 weeks ago about all this, and she goes, "You do realize that when people look at you, they see a person of color?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I don't realize that at all." And she goes, "Yeah, what do you think? They see a white guy?" I'm like, "Well, no, I just never thought about it." And then I thought, then I started thinking about my life. I'm like, if there was ever any racial thing thrown at me, I didn't recognize it or see it as it being racial. I think I attribute it to the fact that I was a punk rocker. My hair, earrings, facial piercings, clothing, because I got more of that than I ever did race. And so I'm like, what do I do? What do I do with this information? So I called up a buddy of mine here in Utah, this white guy. I'll say he's a white guy just because we're talking about this. So I call him up. I go, "Hey man, so when I first showed up at your house with beer to welcome you to the community, did you see a person of color? When walking up to your door?" And he goes, "Are you high? What's wrong with you?" Because because this came out of nowhere. He goes, "No, man, I saw a white guy." And so I laughed at my daughter. I go, "See, now what do I do?" I'm so confused. So anyway, it is absolutely unacceptable. I don't understand racism. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand racism. When it comes to death, I'm really bad. I'm really bad to have. I don't know. I don't know how to act. I don't know what to say. I say all the wrong things. I put my monkey boot in my mouth. You know what I'm saying? I'm really bad when it comes to death. Really, 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 really bad. And apparently I'm really bad when it comes to race too, because I'm not a racist and I've never been a racist, and I don't see color. It just doesn't work like that in my reality. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and as believers, that's not even supposed to be on our radar. Like we don't know anything about that, because scripturally it says that in Messiah there's neither Jew nor Gentile. And those are the only distinctions. Those are the only two races that you have in Scripture.
Yeah.
You're either Jewish or you're one of the nations.
Yep.
And that's it. So, to judge people based on, and I had this conversation actually with someone just the other day. He's a Christian, but there's some, let's just say there's some less than savory attitudes that are in there. And talking about how he doesn't like this group of people and this and that and the other thing. And I said, no. I said, what you're objecting to is the values in that particular culture. So that's a different story. You can dislike a group of people because of the way they behave and the things that they value. I mean, this is why God told Israel to go wipe out all those nations, because they had absolutely abhorrent and abominable values. And so if wife beating, for instance, is a value within that culture and it's common, well, you can say that I don't like those people because this is what they do, but the color of their skin, that's the way God made them.
Yeah.
So why are we even focusing on that?
Right. Well, so this thing about, oh, we're going to tear down statues of Jesus because it represents white supremacy and blah, blah. You know, there's this, that thing's happening now. In the last 48 hours, right?
Well, it's going amok.
And so this guy, right, it's all going amok. So this one guy, I don't even know who he is, but he's like an influencer, a social media influencer. Mm. And I love that line about, remember when you were an influencer, meant you were antisocial? Now you're a social media influencer. Yeah, right. So this guy was saying how, well, wasn't Jesus a person of color, and wasn't he brutalized by a colonization? You know, the Romans, blah blah. I'm like, well, Jesus was a person of color. Are Jews now considered people of color? And then my daughter goes, the same daughter, she goes, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, I never I guess when I think of Jew, I think of Ashkenazi. I don't think of Sephardic. I would be considered a Sephardic Jew. I don't see, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's on me, but I've never considered Jews people of color.
Well, but where do you draw the line? I don't look at, Latin people as necessarily people of color.
Right.
I think they're tanned. They got a bit more pigmentation. I mean, if my wife is outside in the sun for 15 minutes, she'll look like a person of color.
Right. I've got, like, my buttocks is like really, 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 really white.
That's probably a lot more information than I needed. Thanks.
You brought up tanning. I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, but I didn't need to know about your rear end. I mean, you could have talked about your chest. You could have talked about your thigh. No, you had to bring in your butt.
But I don't think you can say Hispanic people are just really good tanners. I think, isn't that considered racial? I mean, everything's like a trigger point these days.
Well, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I heard I was listening to Michael Lake the other day, and he was saying that he says, I've never concerned myself with politically correct because they've never concerned themselves with what's biblically correct.
Yeah.
And, the whole political correctness, I think I have a book on my shelf that I got like 20 some odd years ago.
Shelf, as he looks back there at the fake JPEG image that he's got.
Yeah. Are you jealous now? Come on, Allan.
Yeah. I got book envy. Oh my God.
But I mean, I remember 25 years ago, I bought this book called Political Correctness. And it's a comic book, these guys who draw like political comics and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's all about, the complete insanity. And this is going back to the late 90s and how absurd it is. How much more is it now?
Oh.
But if we take a step back and if we look at really what's going on in the attitudes of people and what's being allowed to happen, I think the most disturbing thing for me in all of what's happening here is the ease in which people are getting sucked into this stuff.
It's too easy, man.
Because if you really take a step back and you look at what some of the things they're doing and they're saying, it is the whole transgenderism thing and, having surgery and stuff like that. Even Camila Paglia, I think is how you pronounce it. She's a lesbian author. And she says transgenderism is idiotic because no matter how many cuts you make to the body and no matter what kind of plastic surgery you do, you still have the DNA. Like she's talking science. And here's a woman who's living an ungodly lifestyle. Look at the whole kerfuffle that's going on with J.K. Rowling. the author of Harry Potter. And she says transgenderism is stupid. A man can't become a woman. And all of the people in the movies that she, produces are turning on her. Now, here's a woman who writes stories about witchcraft in order to present that to the general public. She's promoting evil. But what do we always know about evil? It eventually turns on itself.
Yeah. And and it's just not, there's just no reasoning behind these things.
No, it's not. But how many people are buying into this?
Yeah.
Well, like, can you seriously, all these Antifa people, now they're being paid what, $18 an hour from George Soros? So you're gonna,
I thought it was 15.
What?
I thought it was 15.
Well, it depends on what your job is. But you're gonna sell your soul for $18 an hour?
Well, they were quarantined for 6 to 8 weeks. They had nothing
else.
No,
but like these guys were active, but they've been active for the past few years.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen the Craigslist ads.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, but how many people, like we talk about a great revival, and there's a lot of prophets who are still saying there's going to be a revival.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that's the case. I'm really hoping that at some point in time, God is all of a sudden going to rise up, step in, and turn this thing around. Or
he won't.
Well,
he has done that before.
I think to a degree he will.
That's why that's where the prayer for mercy and grace comes in, because he doesn't have to do anything. He's already done it all.
No.
So when Antifa first came out, there was that joke, and I remember being a part of that joke. I liked the joke was, you know what? Let's round up all these guys. Let's put them in some of these big old cargo planes we have, military cargo planes, and let's take them to the heart of, I don't know, Venezuela, the heart of, just think of, there's plenty of countries. Take them to the heart of those cities.
Yeah.
Here's your 4-block radius. Go for it. Knock yourselves out. Have fun.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do. You want to be a communist little street rat? No problem. I have no empathy, no sympathy. I have zero tolerance for everything and anything that is represented by Antifa. You can't call yourself an anti-fascist while you're doing fascist stuff. Okay? And you know what? How many of these people were or would have been punk rockers? The majority of them. Zero tolerance. I ran into you dumbasses when I lived in Nicaragua, and I gave you a piece of my mind in Nicaragua. I have no tolerance for, did I just say a bad word? I have no tolerance for these people. Zero. They have no substance whatsoever, and you will never find them in a socialistic country trying to do this nonsense. Are you kidding? You know why? Those dumbass asses of them would be handed to them. I have no tolerance for them. Zero.
Yeah. And, to me, the most distressing thing about all this is the attitudes of the churches.
Oh, don't even.
And the fact that all of this.
Are you trying to trigger me this morning? Huh? Are you trying to trigger me this morning?
I don't have to try.
Oh.
It comes automatically. So just to give you an example, I got an email last week from a church. And so in Ontario, they have now said that churches can start regathering, and you can have 30% capacity. I don't know where they came up with this figure from. Probably the same part of that body that's, same part of your body that's not tanned.
That you're afraid to say. It's not tanned.
Well, 30%. They must have had a meeting about this. So they've said 30%. So this email comes out from this church, and it says that, well, we really want to know what you think. Can you please take this survey and tell us how comfortable you are with starting to meet in person again? You want to talk about being triggered? I don't know how. I probably yelled at my wife for about a good 5 minutes after that. Because it was like I almost took the gas pipe when I saw that.
Yeah. You know how many times my wife will want to bust into this room because I'm in here yelling at you guys? First thing in the morning. Oh my gosh. She goes, you yell too much on your Chameleon show. I'm like, well, it's that Rabbinator guy. He's triggering me.
I did the same thing in my message last week. I went off.
Yeah, we talked about
and my wife says to me, she says, "What got into you today?" I was talking scripture. What can I tell you? I was talking about Christians who don't want to follow the scriptures. And then we wonder why the United States is blowing up, because the church, I mean, when Jonathan Cahn wrote the Harbinger, and he says that what makes the United States different from all the other nations in the world is that it was set up to be like Israel. It was set on this. It was established on the same principles, same foundations. The Puritans even considered using Hebrew as the language of the U.S. I mean, you were all this close to being Hebrew speakers, and they decided to go with English. And so the accountability and the standard that God is going to hold the U.S. to is going to be higher than the other nations of the world who are already on their way to destruction.
Yeah.
And so what's happening right now is because the church has rolled over and played dead for abortion and gay marriage and transgenderism, and aren't en masse demanding that these things back down. Well, someone was saying that during the Civil War, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled against the release of the slaves, the Supreme Court. And Abe Lincoln rounded them all up and had them put in jail.
Wow.
Now there's a president who has gumption.
Yeah.
And that's what we're completely missing today, is that
mess.
Where are the believers? Where are the leaders who are standing up? I mean, we have to look to guys like Elon Musk, who are, giving one of these to the government, the establishment, because he's not bowing to kiss the ring. But we're taking surveys of the people.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't get over that.
Yeah. So Chuck Pierce's church on Sunday was on fire, man. I wasn't here.
Oh, yeah?
My wife watched the live simulcast, but it was apparently on fire. I mean, they're just going for it, man. It's like they haven't slowed down. Other ministries have come underneath them since this whole mess happened. It's good to know that we're connected with like people that are alive. You know what I mean? It's good to know that versus the exact opposite, rolling over and just playing dead or putting your head in the sand. So wow. What do we talk about? We need to get a guest on here or take questions or something. I don't know what to talk about anymore. I mean, what else can we talk about? Oh, so today's the first day of the 4th month. Rosh Chodesh last night. After this show, I'm doing an interview with Hebrew Nation Radio at the top of the hour. So we'll be done here at 9 and then at 10 o'clock, 9 my time. And then at 10 o'clock, 12 Eastern, I'll be doing an interview on Hebrew Nation Radio today.
So this is just the appetizer. You're really waiting to get to that.
I woke up this morning and forgot. I love waking up in the morning and not knowing what day it is and what am I supposed to be doing. And I totally forgot. And I have this, and I totally forgot about this interview. It was all set up yesterday. I totally forgot about it until I got a text message about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. Oh yeah, it's Tuesday. So in 17 days, we enter into the season of the basilisk.
The what?
The basilisk. And there's a lot of people we've acquired, not just here, but on my Monday night devotion, that don't know about the basilisk. And so I'm going to be sending them a documentation that I have all about it, and we're going to discuss it. I don't know when or where we should do that. And
So how did your
I mentioned it to my wife. I mentioned, hey, in 2+ weeks, we're going to enter the season of the Basilisk. She goes, it's felt like that. It's felt the last 3 months have felt like the season of the Basilisk. I'm like, I know. What are you going to say?
how did your discipleship thing go last night?
Great. The devotional last night, I think, went really well. It's about Enoch. I mean,
Korah.
Korah. It's about the rebellion of Korah, which is, as you know, something I really think is an important thing to know and learn and understand.
Mhm.
The majority sided with Korah. You're going to go with the 254 plus Levites instead of the 2 guys that have been leading us.
Well, what actually I was reading it the other day, and one thing that was really interesting to me is that he was actually a Cohen.
Yeah, I know.
He was from Kohath, so he was actually part of the priesthood.
I know. This is
And
like,
so when Moses rebukes him and says, "What are you seeking the priesthood for yourself?" But he was already part of that. So
yeah,
so basically, what he was doing was looking to overthrow Aaron.
yeah, he
And
wasn't.
Moses.
Yeah, he wasn't flunky. This was a tactical coup d'état.
Yeah, so he wasn't just the Levite.
No, with 250 Levites, they were like, this was a major move.
This was a lynch mob.
Yeah, and so when God shows up, he reveals himself. He's visible to everyone. And we talked about the 2 brothers sitting in their tent, either absolutely arrogant or absolutely dumbfounded. They found themselves on the wrong side of this. How could we be on the wrong? What do you mean we're the ones that are on the wrong? And how the majority of us will side with Korah, and how we're watching the majority side with Korah right now.
Yeah.
All these things. And and you got to have discernment. You cannot be found on the wrong side of this thing. You just can't. It's like when Jesus comes back, when it's all said and done, when the smoke clears, it'll be too late for you to go, oh, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
It's too late. It's there's no do-over at that point. That's it.
What's another thing that's really fascinating to me in all this is that in last week's Parsha, which I spoke on Saturday, is that God was ready to wipe out Israel already when they wouldn't go into the land. And then Moses, he basically puts God in a corner and quotes God's own words. And Moses says to God, you have to do this.
Yeah.
Because you said.
Yeah. Well, God was going to disinherit all of Israel and start over with just Moses.
And, and I spoke about what a temptation for Moses that might have been, because number one, Moses would have been, a man of honor at that point. It would have been not the tribes of Jacob or Israel. It would have been, the nation of Moses or whatever. But also he would have gotten rid of a huge problem. And yet Moses,
Israel.
Yeah, they were a constant thorn in his flesh. But Moses intercedes.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the rebellion of Korah, Moses then turns around to God and says, don't accept anything from them.
Yep.
Have at her. Even Moses, because now the attack is personal.
Yep.
Now they've actually gone after him specifically.
And his brother.
Yeah. And
he even asks them, what does Aaron have to do with any of this?
Yeah.
No,
he's part of leadership. So they want to take out the whole.
Yeah. And what was interesting also is he goes, you took us away from a land flowing with milk and honey.
Now it's their fault.
Speaking of Egypt.
Yeah.
So I mentioned this last night. It's just like the left. They switched the narrative on him. Up to that point, God has brought us out here to kill us in the desert. Now it's, you've brought us out here to kill us in the desert, and we're doing this on behalf of God for the benefit of the people.
Yeah.
So we're going to get rid of you because we care about the people.
Mm-hmm.
and we're doing the godly thing. And it was spiritual socialism. God is with everyone. Everyone is holy, and God dwells among everyone, not just you. So who are you to put yourself above God's people? It's like, I'm sorry. And Moses is like, let's find out. Let's see who God is really with, who's really holy, and who's really in charge here. We're going to let God sort that out.
Yeah.
So someone's saying here, we need teaching on discernment.
Discernment is a product of obedience.
And it's a product of relationship too.
And humility. You have to know your position before God, and then you have to understand God's order of things.
Right. It's multifaceted. If you don't know, you have to be able to see the dots that connect. You have to be able to see from a higher vantage point, so you can see, oh, this impacts this, and that impacts this, and this impacts that. You have to be able to see all those. It's like chess. So I don't play chess. I never have played chess. I don't. That doesn't make any sense because I'm literally that guy. But chess is like all about 3 or 4, whatever, 5 moves ahead of the actual move, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what chess is. You have to be thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Discernment is very much like that. You have to be able to see the bigger picture. How do you do that? Well, relationship, intimacy, obedience. If you don't have that type of tangible supernatural relationship with God, you're probably not going to, without relationship, you're not going to know him. Without obedience, you're not going to know him. Without, you got to hear his voice. He has to find you a trusted agent to speak to you, to give you these insights on tomorrow or whatever you want to call it. So discernment is absolutely key. How do I describe it in this book I found in my library? I have a stack of books this high on my desk. That's my library. I'm just kidding. I mentioned Paul says something about discernment that I bring up in this book, and it's quite the smack in the face, because it's like, this is really literally what's going on. Let me look it up. I'll find it. I'll do it. Let me see if I can do a digital search. I should have that book here digitally. It'd be a lot easier than me flipping through pages. Discernment. Yeah, it's really important. Discernment is really important. I don't understand how you can do this thing in any way, shape, or form without it. I mean, I really don't. Because you can't. I mean, you literally can't do this thing without it. It doesn't work. Let me see, Paul. There's a great... You see a great thing, Paul. Is it first? Let me just look up discernment. It'd probably be easier. Discernment. Okay. All right. The power of discernment. There's an actual chapter here called The Power of Discernment. All right. We talk about the man of God and the local prophet. That's lots of information. Lots of information. All right, so here's what Paul says. So here, I'm reading out of my book, This Thing is Spiritual. Available at planetbluemedia.com. And it says here, some people have discernment, others don't. Discernment can be taught and learned. and it is an indispensable and foundational characteristic that needs to be present in our ever-growing arsenal. And then here's the New Testament text. About this, we have much to say, and it is hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food, for everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. That's Hebrews 5:11 through 14.
That was what I spoke on as we launched the congregation on Saturday.
Nice. So, some people think Paul wrote Hebrews, and we don't know. But anyway, the writer of Hebrews, chapter 5:11 through 14, is what I just read. The lack of discernment, physical and or spiritual, is synonymous with being dull of hearing, unskilled, childish, and immature, just in the above passage from Hebrews alone. The disciples' inability to grasp the teachings of Jesus was attributed to their lack of understanding. For example, in Matthew 15:16, where the Greek word for understanding is asonidos or something like that, meaning unintelligent, stupid, and foolish. One of the spiritual gifts that we look into later is the discernment of spirits, blah, 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 blah. What else do I say here about discernment? Basically, so if we break down this text in Hebrews, it should give us some insight on what we need to be able to be discerning. We cannot be dull of hearing, so we have to work on being dull of hearing, mature, understanding the basic principles of the oracles of God. We have to be skilled in the word of righteousness, mature, and it's constant practice, and to be able to distinguish good from evil. That's what it says. So, like, one of the things we tell people, Ephesians chapter 5 is all about discernment too, Desiree is saying. One of the things that we tell people, it's like, what was the last thing God told you to do? That's what you should be doing, and you got to keep doing that until he tells you otherwise. I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to teach people about discernment in this medium. I don't know. I'm trying to figure those things out now, because walking with people, having Joe Blow right here, and walking through his life and seeing what he's doing and how he's doing it. And I watch Joe. How he interacts, how he processes information, because that's going to tell me, that shows me the areas that Joe needs work when it comes to discernment, for example. So I use examples like turning off the light. If you have a problem turning off the lights, again, it's like Karate Kid. Wax on, wax off. You don't actually know I'm teaching you karate. You think I'm just taking advantage of you because I want you to wax my car or paint my fence, or the new Karate Kid with the taking off the coat. It really does come down to that. Be faithful in the small. He'll give you. You can be faithful in the big. Most people that lack discernment will have a lot of the same attributes. For example, they don't turn off the lights. They have to be reminded to wash their clothes or to wash their bedding. I live in community. I've lived in community a long time. So these are the things that living in community is one of the easiest ways to help people. Well, in this regard, if they'll allow you to help them. But most people that are lacking in spiritual maturity are also lacking in physical maturity. There's your connection. So if you're a simpleton or simple-minded in the flesh, you're probably a simpleton and simple-minded in the spirit. Mm-hmm. It goes hand in hand. That's why I say what I say in here, because that's what it's actually saying in the script, in the Bible. It talks about that. The disciples were having a hard time hearing or understanding Jesus because they were stupid, literally. They were simple-minded and they were stupid and they weren't very bright. That has to change. And the only way that can change, and if you read the Proverbs, it talks about how that happens. You've got to stop being stupid. You got to stop being a simpleton, and you have to actually start taking care of your business, because a lot of this is just laziness. You know, I you know what I tell myself all the time? I have this little mantra that I tell myself. It's Torah. It's Torah. It's Torah. You know, you walk by the trash can, you see something on the floor, pick it up and throw it in the trash. It's Torah, right? Instead of leaving it there for someone else to pick up. It's just common sense. That's all it is. It's common sense. You know, you're walking out this door. You're walking out of the store eating a donut that you forgot to pay for. Go back and pay for it. Slip of the mind. This little. It's just common sense. Don't leave that for your wife or your husband to do. You do it, right? It's just common sense. These are like, this is how you build the muscles, right? And this is the basic workout. You start with a 5 pound before you go to 200 pound or however that works. Same thing, because once you start developing this muscle memory of obedience and interactivity and extreme, stewardship, and you have to start somewhere. You build this becomes your normal, right? And it's like breathing. It becomes natural and it becomes effortless. Then God, the Holy Spirit, is working, right? You're working in tandem together, like a catamaran. The other things start kicking in. Let me just on the right side. Yeah, that's unfortunate. We were talking about how like Korah and his cohorts actually literally believed that they were doing the right thing. They weren't the bad guys. They weren't trying to do anything bad. They actually thought they were doing the right thing. They actually thought they were doing God's work. Your friends and relatives that are backing BLM and that are over the top extreme about this coronavirus thing and masks and gloves. And I mean, if I knew for certain that I was supposed to wear a mask, I'd wear a mask. But there's just way too much conflicting reports from even the government regarding wearing masks. What's the answer? Can we solve that answer here in the next 30 minutes about masks? Please. Is wearing like a shirt like this, gaiters, your neck gaiters, putting it over your nose, does that work? I'm being told no. I'm being told the masks that you buy that everyone's wearing don't even work.
No. And as a matter of fact, people are starting to experience respiratory issues because you're breathing in your own carbon dioxide.
I don't understand the people that are driving in their car by themselves with the windows up and they're wearing a mask.
One of our customers with the renovations, she's a nurse. And she was saying that the masks that they wear, the N95 mask, I guess, or whatever it is, it's out enough where you have room to breathe. But the masks that everybody's wearing is right up against their face like this. Yeah. And you're doing a homemade jobby.
Right.
And so you're breathing in your own carbon dioxide. Well, if you breathe in your own carbon dioxide enough, guess what happens?
Yeah.
You poison yourself.
So I don't know what the heck's going on, man, about the masks things. But my point is, if you really believe, that your friends and family that are way over the top about masks, or because now it's a political issue, or this Rona thing, or self-quarantining, or shut this down, or tear down that statue down, and this and that. All those people over there, they really believe that what they're doing is right to some extent, right? It's really
but when you have hatred in your heart, then that opens up the door to the enemy to blind you. Yeah. And Romans 1:28 says, as they no longer sought fit to acknowledge God, God gave them over to a depraved mind. Yeah, and they do all of these things. They hate their brother, this, that, and the other thing. And not only do they do these things worthy of death, Paul says, but they give hearty approval to others who do the same thing.
Woohoo! Groupthink.
Well, yeah.
Right. So
I was talking with a pastor. I was talking to him about this racism thing, and he's Jamaican, and so I was suggesting that maybe we should have a program here on the Lamb Network about racism and talk about it from a biblical perspective. And I brought up this one thing, and he says, well, I want to see the article on that. So I sent him the article, and he comes back to me, says, I'm going to take a pass, because he says that the article you sent produces fake news. And so I emailed him back and I said, I'd be curious to know as to what your source is for that, and it comes from the website All News Pipeline. Now, All News Pipeline is owned by and run by Susan Duclos. Susan Duclos is a strong Christian. And she is quoted, that website is quoted many times from Steve Quayle and, people who are well reputed within the community. So he sends me the link, and it's one of these media fact checker sites that's a propaganda tool for the left. But then in the conversation back and forth, he says that we can't have a conference together if we don't agree. And I thought, oh my goodness. So we're not allowed to come, let us reason together, as the scriptures say. We're not allowed to debate things. Allan, the only way that you and I can be on a show together is if we agree about everything. And
it has to be my side of the table. You have to agree with me.
That's true. I understand that. And I thought, there's a lot of things that I thought, and half of them are not, mentionable in a family environment. But I thought, this is what's happened with Christianity, is that unless we all just have this peace, we can't do anything. We can't talk about controversial issues. And then we're handing out surveys to the people as to whether we should get together again or not. Who asked God? Did anybody ask God whether he wanted people to? No, we're going to ask the people how comfortable they feel. And you can bring your stupid gator mask. And you might as well bring a conehead mask too. How can we be salt and light if our senses are so dulled that we can't discern between good and evil? God's not going to speak to you if that's all. If you think that the only way that we can talk to everybody else is if you and I lockstep in the same thing, and that if God forbid we should disagree on even the source of where an article came from, oh no, we can't talk about that. Well, no wonder the country is going up in flames. No wonder the world has been locked. It was easy for the globalists, the New World Order, to shut everything down. All they had to do was create this virus in the lab, leak it out, and they had everybody in place to say, it was just this morning. Massachusetts shut down a gym because they opened contrary to reopening rules. But in Seattle, you're allowed to gather together with hundreds of people as protesters.
Right.
And we're allowing this to happen. It's utter stupidity.
Yeah, it's.
And there's the problem is that there's no warriors left in the church. I wouldn't say there's none. I mean, obviously, that's what the whole Lamb Network is about. We stand for truth. You want to take my head off? Go ahead. I'm not going to stop preaching the truth.
Yeah.
You got Tucker Carlson, who's making a whole lot more sense than anybody in the White House right now. Where are the churches? Oh, they've been preaching a social gospel, a comfy gospel, a watered down gospel for so long that there is no means anymore by which to discern what the truth is. And then pastors have to take surveys to think how people feel. You know what I say about that? Moses got the opinion of the children of Israel far more often than he wanted, and he wasn't consulting them.
Yeah.
Because what do we know about the opinions of the people? They don't know squat. They don't know the will of God. They haven't disciplined themselves to understand things. I'm dealing with a whole bunch of issues here as we're trying to get this congregation started. And I get all kinds of people coming to me and say, well, we should do this, and I want to see this. And finally, I had to have a conversation the other day and said, well, all I heard from you is what you want. I didn't hear from about what God wanted. And why should I listen to you? I don't think he's used to hearing talk like that, because pastors don't say things like that.
Right.
But I told him, the only person who gets an opinion on how this ministry runs is one who contributes their time, talent, and treasure. I better see those three things, and I better see it on a consistent basis before I even remotely decide whether I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And then I have to discern as to whether it's from God or whether it's from your untanned area.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
because unfortunately, that's where half of Christianity's got their heads jammed up.
Yeah, it didn't take very long for this to happen, which is really kind of scary.
Listen, Christianity has been like an ice floe in March on Lake Michigan. It's about that thin.
Yeah. Well, you know, I brought up last night, I actually quoted Korah. I bring up the rebellion of Korah in a song lyric from 1989. Yeah, I've been talking about this a long time.
Yeah, me too.
You know,
and I don't seem to be any further ahead in conveying the message to people than I was when I first started.
I know, right?
Even though I'm a lot more eloquent now than I used to be about it.
Yeah. Because, you know, when you're talking to yourself over and over, it gets easier. Things start rolling off your tongue a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been talking about this crap to Christians for 35 plus years, literally saying the same exact damn thing. And I bet you it's the same. Okay, so my numbers as a writer or as this YouTube guy I've been forced to become in the last 2 or 3 years, right? These numbers are way lower than any of my music numbers, right? That's just the truth. That's just the truth. My book sales, the Feast Unlocked book sales are respectable. I need to sell more of these. But anyway, here's why I bring that up. Because the bigger your audience becomes in music, the stupider they become. It's just true.
Well, the bigger your audience becomes in anything.
Well, that's what I'd like to avoid here, because I couldn't handle that.
We just lost one, so okay.
Because no, really, the bigger your music audience becomes, they're not as discriminate. The listener base isn't as discriminatory. They actually become, because you start breaking into the more mainstream thing, and those people just don't have any, you know. So I have a heart. Now, when it comes to art and all that, no problem. You know, if you want to listen to bad music, you can listen to bad music. I don't care. Just don't enforce it on me. But when it comes to matters of faith, no, man, that's really important. And I have a hard time. I have a low tolerance threshold for people that are just not with the quickness when it comes to spiritual matters. Ask anybody that actually physically knows me.
Yeah, but you see, and this is what I've been saying for a long time, apparently to deaf ears, is that what we were allowed to get away with before is not going to be tolerated anymore.
No, it's not.
Because things are changing around us. And unless our faith increases and unless our discernment increases, see, if you're having to walk through a minefield, you better have discernment.
Right.
Because otherwise, and this is where we're at spiritually, is that the end, and God told last week, my wife was on her way to pick up something, and it was right around the area that I was working in. So she was going to go to the store, and then she came pick me up from work. And she says that she got attacked in the car on the highway. and something actually tried to grab the wheel and take the car off the road. And she had to pray. My son was sleeping in the back of the car, and he actually woke up because of her praying. And she was really shaken up. But what God was telling her, and this is what he spoke to her after about, he said that we need to be alert because the enemy is mobilizing. And so what has allowed the people, or what the people have been allowed to get away with as far as their lack of discipline and discernment, and still been able to kind of make it through, isn't going to work anymore. Yeah. Those defenses, see, when the enemy starts launching a barrage, then it's only those who are trained who are going to be able to survive.
Right.
And so what you now have is the church is now going through a real refining. It's going through a cull.
Yeah,
and
I about that last night.
And the prophecy that Yeshua said about many will fall away. You get to John chapter 16 and verse 1 and 2, and he says they're going to hand you over to be killed and think that they're doing God a favor. I mean, not only are they going to turn away from the faith, but then they're going to turn on you.
Right.
And they're still going to be like Korah, thinking that they're serving God.
Right. And so I want these numbers to grow, obviously. I was yawning. I want the Chameleon Church numbers to grow. I want the Exodus to get out. I want all these numbers to grow. But I'll only be satisfied with those growth numbers if we're dealing with people that are serious about these things that we're talking about. Do you know what I mean? I mean, God, imagine if there was 2 more dozen people in this room and they didn't get 10% of what we were talking about. That would be incredibly frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't mind having to deal with this stuff, individually or something, but man, in group, that's just brutal. The Monday night group is growing, and it's a good group. But what's really awesome about it is that they're helping each other. It's not just me having to always, I'm just not a really good babysitter of adults.
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, it's like we have to have these. I don't know, man. If you've been doing this for 30 years and you don't understand this, what have you been doing for the last 30 years? I mean, really, what have you been doing? It's I don't know. It's scary to me. I can't even fathom being. I've been saved 40 years this year, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to have 30 years under my belt of like just nothing. I don't know. It's kind of scary. I mean, I don't know how. One, you can't do this thing without discernment. There's just no way. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you can do this without discernment. It's impossible. And speaking in tongues, we've talked about this before. I don't know how you can do this thing without being able to speak in tongues, because it's like that's like your like you've heard me say this before. It's like the entry gateway gift or whatever to all this other stuff.
But I don't.
I know. No, I know. We've talked about that. My point is, I don't know how you do that. Not you, but I don't know how people do this thing without this spiritual interactivity. Is that a better way to put it?
Mm-hmm.
Because without spiritual interactivity, I'm not sure what it is that you're doing at this point, right? Because God is spirit. Everything that we're talking about is played out in this other realm, the spiritual realm. The physical is a manifestation of that spiritual realm. And if you're not engaged in that spiritual realm, you literally don't know what's happening here. And then 20, 30 years goes by,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you said earlier, when we were talking about discernment, well, it requires obedience. It requires stewardship. It requires relationship. You have to know. You have to have a relationship with God. You have to have a revelation of the person of Jesus Christ. There's all this stuff that has to be going on that's supposed to kick in when you got saved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had an immediate transformation when I got saved. like immediate.
Mhm.
Didn't you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's people that there's people that you and I can both talk to, and that would tell us that didn't happen to them.
Wow. So did they really get saved?
I don't know. Well, their lives tell us that. Their life and their life choices tell us that. The quality of their life, it's like, if your life doesn't mirror the Bible, I don't know what it is that you're doing. And why haven't you been so concerned about the fact that your life isn't mirroring the Bible? That should be a concern. You should wake up in the morning and be concerned about the fact that your life doesn't mirror the Bible. Not just settle. I guess this is just the way it is. It's called dead religion, and you go to a dead church, or I don't know. I'm just saying, you should, seek out your own salvation with fear and trembling. If you wake up in the morning and your life doesn't mirror the Bible, that should be a red flag for you.
Well, and if there's no impetus to desire to change, if you're not actively working on something, that's another dead giveaway.
Yeah.
If you're if you aren't more keenly aware of sinful attitudes and practices in your life, because Scripture says that we are being conformed to the image of Messiah, and he was the Torah that became flesh. He was the Torah. He walked it. He lived it, and he was Torah perfected. And if we're not struggling with those things and wrestling with those things and asking God, just the other day, I have this guy from Peterborough who, and I know he is influenced by evil spirits. Like when he goes off, I know who's speaking. And I ignored him, and he was getting madder and madder about it. And I was trying to figure out what to do, and then all of a sudden the Spirit just spoke to me about how I should respond to him. And so finally I sent this email to him. He had been texting me, and this is what he does. He gets mad and he starts texting, and there's just, there's a really good word in the English language, and it's vituperative. And it's vile speech. It's and this is what keeps popping up as he's doing this. I mean, it's the accusations, it's this, that, and the other thing. And God just says, answer him very sweetly. And so I sent him an email, and I thanked him for this, and I thanked him for asking about my family, even though he didn't. And I said, well, the reason why we haven't, been in touch is because, well, there's been this global pandemic, and it's kind of shut the world down. So, there's no... 5 minutes later, he texted me back and asked for, apologized to me. 5 minutes. So he'd been stewing. And it says, where is it in Proverbs? A kind word turns away wrath. Now, what did he deserve? I could have gone after him. And listen, someone wants to get into a battle of words with me. I can do that. My JPEG over there has prepared me for all kinds of stuff.
Oh my God.
And my flesh really, listen, I hung up my punching bag last week. I got it sitting in my basement now. And anytime I get frustrated, I can go down and just whack the stuffing out of that thing. But instead, what the Holy Spirit told me to do was go counter to what my flesh said. And if we're not doing that in all aspects of our life, and whatever it is that we're in bondage to, or we're struggling, or we're weak in, if we're not working to improve that, I do a lot of study on the temperaments. So I was in professional recruiting, and for me, it's foundational to understand what someone's temperament is, because of you understand how people are wired. And I was explaining this to a couple of people as we met for fellowship on Saturday night. And one of the things that I was saying was that every temperament, Hippocrates was the one who, developed the original model for this. And you got the 4 basic temperaments, you got the primary and secondary. But I said every temperament has strengths and weaknesses. And depending on our environment will determine whether we have more strengths or weaknesses. the more affirming, loving, and protective of environment, the more of the strengths will come out. The more of an abusive or dysfunctional or whatever, the more negativity in as we're growing up or whatever we're living in, the more the weaknesses will come out. But I said, what the Holy Spirit desires to do, he said, he made you for a particular reason and purpose and function. And I said, but what we need to be doing is when there's weaknesses in our temperament, cholerics are prone to anger. Shocking on this show, I know. And if we're not struggling against that, see, my flesh was ready to jump up and just pound this guy. But God says, no, you're going to do it. You're going to love him anyway. And you're continuing to pray for the forgiveness of his sins, just like Moses did for the children of Israel, so that God can forgive them, even though they haven't repented. If we're not struggling with that all the time, if we're not constantly looking to get better, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, what really is your faith all about? The whole purpose of our faith is to become more like Messiah.
Right. I think they forgot that.
You think that the whole purpose in Yeshua coming was so that you can get your Willy Wonka ticket to heaven?
Yeah, I really do think so.
There's a lot of people who think that. And all the preaching of the gospel is, well, God loves you. My wife was working at a Christian school last year, and she was brought in as an education assistant for the class because you had a bunch of hopped up kids on adrenaline and anger. And you had, I mean, it was a class, let me tell you. And the teacher was totally in over his head. So my wife was and it was at the end of the year too. So they waited and allowed this thing to go on much longer than it should have. But she was brought in as the sheriff. And so while he was teaching, she's making sure that everything's okay, because that my wife has a lot of experience in that. And she says they would do devotionals every morning. And every morning, and this is grade 5 and 6. So they're preteens, and they're getting toward teenagehood, and their hormones are starting to go all. And you had some really strong personalities, and you also had some really dysfunctional family environments. That's a good combination to have with a teacher who hasn't got a clue how to discipline. I mean, it was a perfect storm. But she says every devotion that he gave in the morning was about how Jesus loved them. And so finally she says, can I do the devotion? And so he says, yeah, you can do it tomorrow. And she talked about Cain, and she talked about sin crouching at the door and its desires for you, but you must master it. She talked about obedience, and she talked about consequences. And the kids are all looking at her like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
Nobody had ever talked to them about that kind of stuff. And that's foundational to our faith.
Yeah.
If we're not discussing those things, then what do we really believe, and what are we subscribing to? And what this feel good, God loves me, and God loves me, and he's going to bless me, and it's your best life now, and good heavens.
Well, what is it that you said when one of the first things we met? You said blowing sunshine,
pumping you full of sunshine,
pumping me full of sunshine. That's what it's about.
That's all it is.
That's all it is. Yeah.
That's all it is you're telling me the things that I want to hear. And if you're surveying the people about what they want in church and how comfortable they are, the absolute very last thing that I am concerned about is what people are comfortable with and what they want. The whole purpose in then coming to church or synagogue or whatever you want to call it, or Bible study, is the fact that they need to be uncomfortable with where they're at, and God needs to change things in their life so that they can be more like him. Yeah. Their comfort should be the absolute last thing on anybody's concern list.
Right. But then if you're not concerned about people's comfort, then you don't have love.
I've been sensitive.
You don't have grace. You're a meanie because you're not tolerating wherever it is that they're at. This is just, there's that flip side.
And don't come to me, like you said, with your agendas.
Yeah. I can't. No. Nope.
Yeah. Now, if you come to me and say that,
I understand that's what you do, and I understand that's what you always do, and I understand that everyone plays that game. Homie, don't play that. I don't play that.
And people are stunned when they come to me and I tell them to, nope. And when I say I don't care, all of a sudden they're like, now what do I do? People always care about what I want. No, actually, I don't.
Before that church was shut down in Park City, one of the main family that, they were like probably like 50% of the people left.
Yeah.
The mother says, because it's, it's all her adult children and all her grandchildren, it's that type of situation. But she goes, you know what, Allan, I bet you if we never came back to this church, you wouldn't care, would you? I'm like, no. Actually, no, you're actually absolutely right. If you guys never came back, I wouldn't. No skin off my teeth, man.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Yeah. You guys are lying, gossiping, deceiving people. No. It wouldn't bother me one bit. Because you know what? You're going to get me killed.
Yeah.
I can't take you into the battlefield because you're going to get me killed, because you're so delinquent in your responsibilities. You're so delinquent in your walk. You're gonna literally be walking around with hand grenades in your pockets with the pins pulled. You're gonna get me killed. I'm sorry, I don't have any oil to spare. You're gonna have to go get some of your own.
And it's getting close to midnight. I told this one guy, and he's got quite a prestigious position in what he does. And I said, I already told you, because we had a conversation a couple of weeks before, and this was my follow-up. And I said, I don't care about what people want. I said, I only care about what God wants, and I care about what people need. And what I have found is with the vast majority of believers, there is a huge gap between what they want and what they need. And I'm here to give people what they need. I'm here to give them the truth. I'm here to train them up in the truth. I'm here to release them into their calling and then to provide them with opportunities. I was explaining to him that after we left my ministry back in Toronto, when my rabbi completely went off the rails and fired me and stole my last paycheck, tried to have my ordination revoked. So we had a couple of people that were meeting at our place just as a home fellowship after all this happened. And so here I am, incredibly wounded. I mean, I took the brunt of that for a year. And we're sitting on my couch. There's 5 of us in my living room. And she looks at me, this one woman, she looks at me and she says, well, don't feel any pressure to send me to Israel. Because she wanted to be a missionary in Israel.
Right. Gee, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. And so I said, oh, don't worry about that, honey. I said, you're going to help build this first before we even consider that. And she was gone like within a month.
Yeah.
People come to you with what they want to do, and they're not asking, how do I build? Where are the people that when Moses takes up an offering, he has to say stop? Because the people are so locked into the vision that the leader has given. And I keep saying is like, my job is to tell us where we're going because God has told me. And I said, this one guy, he was saying, well, I want this, I want that. I'm not comfortable with this. And I said, there's only one question you should be asking, whether I'm from God or not. And if you have discerned that I am sent from God, and that's what apostle means, sent out one. If you have discerned that I have been sent by God and brought down here, then the next question you need to ask is, how do I help make this come to pass? How do I help build what God is already in the process of building? That's it. I don't care what you think about this. I don't care what you think about that. I don't care whether you think that my preaching is this or that or the other thing. I don't care. And I don't care. I have never cared what people think. Your opinion is irrelevant to me because why should I care?
Yeah.
Let me look at the fruit in your life. If you have fruit that I want, then I care about what you think because I know that you're aligned with God. But if there's no fruit in your life, the fruit that I'm after anyway, I mean, there's people, everybody has fruit. It's either the fruit of the spirit or the fruit of the flesh. And you could be wildly successful in this life and you can be a complete jerk and you can be, I don't want that kind of fruit. I want to know how I can draw closer to God and be more effective for his kingdom.
Yep.
Those are the only things I'm concerned about.
Right. And I want to surround myself with people like that.
Yep. And I told this guy, I said, you know what? We have a lot of affection for you and your wife. And I said it would be a whole lot easier to build this if you were on board.
Right. Now let me I do want to say this because this might confuse some people. That does not mean that I do not eat with tax collectors and sinners.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I eat with tax collectors and prostitutes and sinners all the time.
Sure.
What we're talking about is different. See, Paul says, if you call yourself a believer and you live like this, don't have anything to do with them. Don't even break bread with them because they're greatly deceived. Now, the household of faith is who we judge, and only the household of faith.
God judges the world.
Right. When it comes to the world, they're not under the same covenant.
Nope.
I will feed you, I will house you, I will give you drink. But if you're calling yourself a Christian and you have no semblance of that, now we have a problem. And with that, Chameleon Church, don't be like Korah.
Don't be like Korah.
And don't be like the people that, because the majority that went with Korah. Don't be like, and how do we know the majority went with Korah? Because the next morning, the very next.
Oh boy!
Morning, oh my gosh!
And I'm going to be talking about this on the Shabbat broadcast. I'm going to be probably bringing some insight that a lot of people haven't thought about. So there's your commercial for Saturday's broadcast.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to be on Hebrew Nation Radio at the top of the hour. Planet Blue Media, get the books. Monday night, we do a weekly devotional that goes through the book. The Rabbinator is going to be talking about the morning after pill, the morning after the rebellion of Korah after pill.
Mm-hmm.
On this Shabbat. It's the beginning of the 4th month. Today's the first day of the 4th month. This is a wild month leading into the 9th of Av,
mm-hmm.
which we will talk about. So yeah, if you're on the Exodus to Ingathering Facebook chat, I will be sending you a link to that documentation. If you're not on there, well, take care of that. Darryl?
Remember to like and share the show.
And say hi to Mark when you see him out there in the Webiverse, Googleverse. And until next week.
You're listening to Chameleon Church. Biblical Antidotes for the Modern Man. With your host, Allan Aguirre.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.